So I see that Jerry's just sat himself down. So I'd like to welcome Jerry Fontaine. Can you give him a warm welcome, please?
This for your presentation?
No, just that.
Okay. I need some water.
Anin bonjour. Makwa gima indi go nin. Makwa no totem. Ujibunish na renin. Sakatong donji. Donji pa. Miigwech dana gina ma pindek nungom. Chicago anisha abenun chiok. Miigwek pidaban. These children are the future. They represent the new dawn, the new horizon for us. I'm really having difficulty with the lights. They're really incredibly bright. I want to begin by first saying miigwech to all of you that are here. Miigwech to the organizers for making this event, this forum possible. And as I said, children, boy, they're important. Families are important. And what I see, what I hear is, the child and the family are being strangled by a system that really doesn't understand our people in the first place. So I want to speak a little about that this morning, but I also want to acknowledge a number of people that I've come to know over the years. By way of introduction, my name is Jerry Fontaine. I'm from Saging. Ojibwe Anishinaabe community just northeast of here, for those of you that don't know where Saging is. I was an Indian Act chief in the late 80s, 1980s, throughout the 1990s. And I say Indian Act chief because I was elected under the Indian Act. I know that we have some representatives from custom councils, so I want to acknowledge and show my respect and give my respect to you. I also want to acknowledge a number of leadership men, women, that I grew up admiring and respecting, because of the work and the commitment they had to our fight, our political fight, our economic fights, our spiritual fights. I mean, I see people from the Médé here. I see people from the Native American Church here. And I think it's important that we acknowledge and show respect to these men and women for their walk, because this is where this is where our sacred stories, our creation stories, rest and are protected, and this is where they're shared. And everything that we are as Anishinaabe comes from our understanding of our creation story. How we come to think the way we think about our world. And that's important. And also, these places, these pretty important sacred and spiritual places also are the place where where our knowledge of how we should behave are taken care of. I hear time and again the importance of the 7 teachings. These teachings came to us from a certain place. Shared that with Wanabuju. Shared these teachings with Wanabuju. And these teachings explained or told us how we should walk our walk on this earth. And these places, these spiritual and these sacred places, also are the place where our knowledge, where we get our knowledge about certain things, how we come to know certain things. Manutu Kewanan, these ceremonies are pretty fundamental to how we learn things. And I want to share a little bit about, probably my first year as a young Indian Act chief at Saging. And I want to share this, because for me it became really a defining moment in my life personally and my political life. But before I do that, there's so many people here. Like I said, boy, I grew up respecting people like Ernie Daniels, Vince Pierre, George Monroe. I see Henry Travers there, Dave Rundle, Phil Painter, Florence. Boy, these guys stood at the front line of the fight for so long, boy. And I always, like I said, I always admired. I was a young guy seeing these guys when they were in leadership positions. They still take the fight. They're here. I was at the table sharing some stories about Chimeo when we were, when I was young. And the importance of Inakinegewen, Anishinaabe Inakinegewen, Anishinaabe law, Anishinaabe Deben Dizwin, to be in control of your own life, to be self-determining. Sovereignty. Again, Inakinegewen. No one, no government, and this is no disrespect to any white people. No white person ever gave us that right. It was our Kijimenetu gave us that right. But for some reason we've been, we've kind of relinquished some of that right and some of that Creator-given opportunity to do things for ourselves. It's like Elder George Monroe was saying, we're trying to fit in this box, and it ain't going to work. And I say it ain't going to work because it's not. And we hear continually about nation-to-nation relations. Well, you know what? There isn't one nation. There's 32 nations across this country, across Manitou, okay? And each one of these 32 nations we have our own governing protocols. And we have, different creation story. We might have different ceremony. But at the end of the day, the commonality is that we're all Anishinaabe. We're people of this land. We didn't come from anywhere else. Kishimanatu placed us here. So I think that's important. That's important to keep in mind. I also want to say this. In terms of the difference between Aboriginal because I hear this term Aboriginal right? We have treaty and Aboriginal rights, but the term, I really have a lot of difficulty with the term. Because what the term says, it's actually kind of a lukewarm acceptance. Yeah, you know, it's government, it's white people saying, yeah, you know what, yeah, maybe you were here first. Yeah, we'll give you that. So we'll say you have some Aboriginal right. But we should be more certain. We should be more proud in terms of how we talk about our rights. We have primordial rights. Our rights, we derive these rights since the beginning of time. There's no doubt. There's no uncertainty. We know for a fact that we were here since the beginning of time. Mewe primordial right. So, in terms of my presentation today, I'm going to share. I have a lot of paper here, and I want to share this this little story. I sat at a panel one time with Harry Wood during the AGI. There was developing the AGI, the Aboriginal Justice Inquiry Implementation program. So I sat with Harry Wood, and I was so impressed with this man. He had a lot of papers. He had a big pile of papers, and he was talking and he was talking and he was talking. And then I glanced over at his papers, and I realized that he didn't have anything written on his pages. And he was just talking, and I said, asked him, why did you do that? He says, well, you know what, I have to show these people to make them think that I wrote a speech, but I didn't. So he was just, like that was a gift. You know, these gifts we don't acknowledge in our people. You know, we talk about oral history. And we have speakers in this forum that are, you know, they have this incredible gift. And they have this gift to be able to move from, well, I'm an Ojibwe speaker, so to move from Ojibwe Moan back to English. I don't have that gift. I have to kind of, if I'm speaking Ojibwe Moan, I have to kind of, and if I'm going to flip to English, I have to kind of change my mindset a bit. But you have people here that can just seamlessly move, you know, from language to language. And that's the essence of our worldview as well, is our ability to, well, to speak our language. That's the doorway into our worldview. So, I'm going to speak a little bit about Ugumao and just what this, what this governance means to me, or what Anishinaabe governance means to me. I'm going to talk a little bit about sovereignty as well, Inakinige, our ability to Inakinige, and speak a little bit about self-determination, Dibane Dizuin. So, as I said, I was elected as Inyanak Chief in Saging in 1987. The community was pretty divided, you know, when I came to office. There was no parade or anything like that, and you know, as a young guy, you get elected to this position, you think, oh, you know, there's going to be all kinds of adulation your way, but there wasn't any. You know, the band Saging was in receivership. The ultimate penance for trying, you know, of government to punish our people, because normally when you talk receivership or coup management, it's the very poor that are punished, that shoulder all this the burden of paying off this debt. Children suffer. Single parents suffer. Chinishnabek, they suffer too. So that's the ultimate penance, right? For those of you that have been involved in Indian Act councils, you know that. So there was no adulation, and this is the power or the power that the Department of Indian Affairs thinks they have. So our first day in office, because we were in receivership, there was no electricity at the band office. And so we had our meeting, and we came to office like late spring, so it was still kind of damp, cold, and it's dreary. And we had no electricity. And then that day we came to office, welfare was supposed to, social development was supposed to have been paid. But the department, to show this new council that they meant business, didn't come to provide, to disperse the payments. They didn't. So you had people lining up, people milling around the band office, really upset with council. You know, why, we heard, first day in office, why did we elect you SOBs? Why did we elect you useless bunch of people? The council, we were relatively young. We decided that day we were never going to let the department have that kind of power or hurt our people again. So once we got established, once we got some footing, we asked the department to come again. But what I also asked at that time was our lawyer to come, our legal counsel, and our constable. And there's a reason behind having the legal counsel there, because what we were going to do was a little different, was a lot different. So when the Department of Indian Affairs came, we had them sit down, and then I asked the constable, the late Willie Arkinson, Willie, read the charges and arrest them. Willie Arkinson got up, read them the charges, and arrested them for a breach of trust, breach of fiduciary, and breach of treaty obligation. And these people said, well, you can't do that. I said, well, we can do anything we want. This is our jurisdiction. This is our territory. Little did we know that as well, that a message got out to regional office here that we had taken these workers, like we took them hostage, and that was one of the reasons why we had the legal counsel there, to make certain that we didn't breach any. We put them under house arrest. And people at that time, and again, Anishinaabe law or Aboriginal law is kind of a gray area. But we know within our jurisdiction, it's our people that have the power, because the only time, and this, I grew up learning this. You see signs in some of our communities, no trespassing. The only time federal law can come into our community is murder, grand theft, sexual assault. That's the only time. So we were under this weird structure. We were able, we exercised our right, our jurisdictional right to make charges and to make arrests. We also did that as well, actually the same constable with when Jean Chrétien was in the community. Willie Arkinson caught him for speeding, or the person I was driving for speeding. And he says, you can't do that, don't you know who I am? And Willie quickly responded, well, if you hit a child, or if you got into an accident, you sure as hell wouldn't want people to know that you were that you had hit a kid, or you created an accident. So that's another example. And this is kind of an interesting thing too, in terms of, we know sheriffs come into our communities to repossess goods and what have you. You know, if you have time payments, you don't make your payments because sheriff come into our communities. So anyways, in this instance, it was a Friday afternoon. People were off to lunch. I get this call. Well, I was sitting in the lobby. So phone rings, I pick it up. And this lady's really upset at the other end of the line. Where's that bloody chief? I said, you're speaking to him. It's Jerry. Oh, well, what gave you the right to let the sheriffs into our community? I said, I had no understanding. I didn't know that the sheriffs were there. So I had our constables go and ask the sheriffs to leave because they were trespassing. So what happened? The sheriffs were there with the RCMP. The RCMP were there as peacekeepers. So the constable, Willie Arkinson, again he gave me a call. So what do you want me to do? I said, arrest them for trespassing. So he arrested them for trespassing. And the RCMP got involved and said, you can't do that. Constable Arkinson calls again. The RCMP are not letting me do that. Well, arrest them too for obstruction of justice. So the RCMP were arrested as well. And the interesting thing about this, the Attorney General's office moved pretty quick. Because within a certain number of minutes, the Attorney General's office was calling. But what we were doing, we were exercising our law. We were exercising all of the rights and power that we had within our jurisdiction. And the RCMP really had no right to be in the community. And from that point forward, any time the RCMP had to came into our community, they either had to be with one of our constables, or they didn't come into the community at all. I mean, I only have 5 minutes, so yeah. But I'm just going to, in terms of child and family, I teach at the University of Winnipeg, Indigenous Studies. So yesterday, one of the classes, in our second to last class, we talked about child and family. I mentioned to them that I was speaking at a child and family conference today. And you have, in the class, you have a lot of non-Anishinaabe kids. I mean, they're kids from different backgrounds. But these kids understand that the families are being strangled. Like they asked, in your opinion, why do the children, when they're apprehended, why do they have to leave their home? Why is the child punished? And as soon as the child is apprehended, the system doesn't work to bring the family unit together. It works to keep it separate. These young people see that. And I was talking to Yvonne from Washagamish, actually. She's been working with the system for a little bit. So I said, well, what do you think about this? And she says, you know what, we should get rid of this. We should try and step out. And this is what George Monroe and Ernie Daniels are talking about, stepping outside of this box and doing things on our own. And I mentioned the Midewin, and I mentioned the Native American Church, because they're the keepers of our ancestral knowledge. I very seldom use the word traditional as well, because when you use that word traditional, it kind of implies that anything that we do, and this is what the narrative, and this is what the mainstream narrative, anything that we do is going to die because it's traditional, because things evolve. So we have to start changing as well how we, how we refer to things. Anyways, these, this is where we're at, and I want to be very respectful to the people that are, to all of you that are, because you're working with a system, and in the eyes of these young men and women that I teach, the system is broken. It's not our system for the most part. We don't use custom. We don't use teachings. We don't use ceremony. We don't use any of that. We get the authority to do apprehensions, to strangle our family from a government that's not ours, that's not representative of ours. So this is what Debate Dizwin, Inakine Gewin is all about. It's about being able to make the decisions on our own or for ourselves. This is what sovereignty is about. It's not about, we shouldn't surrender anything. And, I used to be quite proud of Saging and their, the fact that it was non-mandated. One of the only non-mandated agencies when I was the Indian Act chief there. And it wasn't because of it wasn't my doing, but that's just the way they structured. And the fact that they were non-mandated meant that they didn't apprehend children. And government, for whatever reason, whatever it's a logic that defies me. Like, I don't understand why government thinks, federal and provincial, think that they can control they control how we see our future. And our future is about these children. I hear horror stories of young children going to the system at 1 month, aging out at 18, 19 years old, in the system for 18 bloody years. And I don't think anyone in Ottawa or at the legislative building has the authority, to say or to tell us they know what's right for our kids or our communities or our families. It's not, it's not right. But if I can just finish off with this. I mentioned I came to office in late Indian Act office in late 1980s. We kind of had a raucous start. I asked the elders, Chinishnabek, well, how do we deal with this? How do we deal with this division? And one of the things they told me, and it was important that it was important to them that I hear this. What we were going to do to change how we did things was ceremony. And I said, well, what kind of ceremony are you speaking of? They mentioned about Chiskan. The shaking tent. And I'd never been to a Chiskanning before. I'd never been to a shaking tent. So one of the elders was co-hosting at his home. The night of the Chiskan, there was a big storm, and like it was raining and it was windy and it was cold. And the elders that were there asked, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, I don't know. We'll go and talk to the Chiskan and we'll go and see the shaking man. I went to him and I said, well, you know, what are we going to do? And he kind of smiled. He says, boy, you got to do things the right way, the Indian way. Do you want to have the shaking tent tonight? Wow, well, you want it tonight or tomorrow? So, well, it says, boy, it's it's raining really hard. He says, well, no. So, well, we'll have it tomorrow. He says, Hamsa, kina ni shugumakan, because you're. So that's what we did. We had the ceremony the next night. But I just want to say this. So in the ceremony, council was told how we were going to conduct ourselves. We were told to have community assemblies every season. So be born winter, spring, summer, and fall. We would assemble for 4 days. And at these assemblies, chief and council wouldn't say anything the first day. Chief and council would listen to the people. It would be the people that would, because again, it's about community. So if you have an issue with the community in terms of the direction of the community, you should be able to voice that, and you shouldn't have anyone interrupting. So first thing, people would come in. Obviously, people are angry. Sometimes people can be angry. Sometimes people can be distrustful, mistrustful. So we listened. Second day, we started prioritizing the issues. So we get a plan. We look at what to focus. Third day, how are we going to resolve those issues? And again, chief and council are not having any say in this. All we're doing is listening. Fourth day, chief and council talk. And the reason for that is to show that we were listening and that we would follow the direction of the community. This essentially is well, because we're an Ojibwe Anishinaabe community, it's an Ojibwe Anishinaabe Inakanege process. So everything that we did from that point forward came from the Chiskan. And I have to say, it came, like I said earlier, it became to be a pretty defining moment in my life, because you put trust and you put faith in something that you can't see, you can't touch, you can't taste, but you can hear. So, and I thought at that time, before we actually started the shaking tent, I thought, boy, I'm going to be I'll probably be out in one term. But I ended up being there for the next 10 years. And the point of all of that, I guess, is just basically we have to trust. We have to trust our people. We have to trust our stories, and we have to trust our own plan. So I think that's that's what I wanted to share. I know it's not really focus on child welfare, but boy, your jobs are tough. I don't envy you. And I think leadership, is dealing with two systems, two levels of government that are constantly changing. They're like shapeshifters, these governments. And some will say that they're our friends and will tell us that with a smile on their face. They're pretty difficult to handle because I think it's a distraction for the most part. And then you have some governments that damn well that they're not. They're not going to support whatever we suggest, and they'll do everything in their power to put barriers in our place. So, with that, I'll say miigwech, and before I say, I said I would acknowledge Miles Crochet. He was a council member at Saging for a number of years. I see Councillor Henry Swampy over there, and Dave Rundle, Vince Pierre, Henry Travers. I saw Mona Gordon walk in. Mona is from Lac Seul, very involved in bringing community or ancestral law, Ojibwe Anishinaabe into what the community does, both from a child welfare way and a governance way. So with that, I'll turn it back to my cousin, my older sister. She's Makwa, ututem gavin. How miigwech?
Thank you very much, Jerry.
I'll take my blank papers.
A world of knowledge. So much he has shared. Just to really appreciate the message of we need to know where we come from in order to know where we are going. And in that process, that it's part of our relationship with our identity. So it's a lot of very valuable information and very seasoned information. Jerry has been around for a very long time, fighting for the people. So thank you, Jerry. Thank you very much.